He is something special.
This is amazing, and look what it produces. They're trying to catch the backside of Bryce Love, and they don't do it. Touchdown.
Love spins free. Love in the open field finally.
This is what he's been doing all year. Makes you miss.
Toss to Love. Cuts it up. Cuts it back. Love on the loose. And Love never lies. Touchdown, Stanford. Stanford trying to avoid a gigantic upset. Second and goal. 3 yards away from a win. Crist, little jump ball. Touchdown! And Stanford will escape Corvallis.
And welcome to College Football Live. I'm Chris Cotter alongside Mike Gold Jr., Trevor Matich, and Stanford head football coach David Shaw. You got to feel pretty comfortable on this set, right? You got a little scat back type like Glenn Milburn over here, but we got a couple of offensive linemen. You got to appreciate these dudes.
Hey, that's what I'm used to. Big guys up front, let the little guys eat.
And smart guys, too, which kind of brings me to my first question. Recruiting at Stanford. You know, I look at some of these classes, and in this day and age, the top 5 or 6 programs are getting all 4- and 5-star guys. How do you go out there and compete with the Alabamas and the Georgias and the USCs of the world when you've got the academic requirements to go along with it?
So the theory behind it is if you look at the 50 states in Canada, we can go out and we can find our guys. We can find 20 guys a year that are great football players, great students, and great people. Now, it has to be 50 states because we've got guys from 35, 36 states on our team. So we have to go from coast to coast to find the guys we're looking for.
Coach, when you recruit, you can look at how guys are qualifying to be able to get into Stanford. And I think what they do as a high school student, as a junior high student, tells you a lot about their character.
Oh, there's no question because, it's about doing the little things. Just like being good in football, it's the same thing being good in school. You can be a C student, but you can work really, really hard and get B's. You can be a B student, work really, really hard and get A's. So those guys that get A's and B's and can divide their time up between being really good at school and being a good athlete, those are the kinds of guys we're looking for.
Coach, no surprise, bunch of smart guys on campus, always a quality offensive line for the Stanford Cardinal. And I mean, going all the way back to Coach Harbaugh's days there, what was it that you guys decided that was going to be the emphasis for this program?
Well, for me, it goes back to before Jim got the job at the University of San Diego. We had a powwow. We talked about what it was going to take to be successful at Stanford. And what I input, which Jim, of course, had a great game plan. I talked about when I was there in the 90s, you bring up Glenn Milburn. At that time, Denny Green built the biggest line in all of football. We're the biggest. We were averaging over 320 pounds back in the 90s, which was a big deal. And we had a guy named Touchdown Tommy Vardell, who was 240 pounds. So we were going to bring big, physical offensive line play, a big physical back to Stanford football. And we did that with the guys that we had up front, David DeCastro and that crew, and then Toby Gerhart, who ran roughshod. As we were building the program, we wanted to make sure we built those big guys up front, and we do the same thing today.
You know, the interesting thing, too, we talk about Stanford all the time and how you love the fullback and the double tights, right? But you're not 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I mean, if you look at the numbers, even not just last year with Bryce Love, but even the past few years, you guys have a lot of explosive plays.
That's the thing, too, where I think that's where we wanted to start, with the big physical guys up front, control the clock, play action pass, etc. And now we want to be more versatile. I think because we've established the program as a perennial winner, we've won a lot of games. Now those recruits are looking for us. So now we want speed, we want athleticism. So you've seen the last few years with the Christian McCaffrey, with the Bryce Love, with the Ty Montgomery before that, guys that are big-time returners, big-time guys with the ball in their hands. So now we can get those 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but we can also break the 50, 60-yarders.
Coach, you talk about guys looking to you. I want to go back to the academic side because I want to talk about Bryce Love as a football player. He's the leading Heisman candidate preseason right now as people talk about it. But he is a major in human biology. He has spent a lot of time doing stem cell research with one of the leading stem cell researchers experts in the world who happens to be right on campus at Stanford. How does that academic side of Stanford affect your recruiting?
Honestly, and I like to say this, you can get a good education anywhere. We understand that. But at our place, we try to get the best education along with the best athletics. So for us, a guy like Bryce, he may come to practice 15 minutes late because he's coming from lab, and that's okay for us. because we'll structure practice to make sure when he gets there, he gets the most out of practice, gets everything he needs to be successful. But we do the same thing for all of our guys. Those guys that are being engineers, those guys that are studying whatever they're studying, they can study anything they want because they want to be great in that subject. But at the time that they come to practice, we want them to be great in football too.
Coach Bryce, a Heisman front runner this year, was a runner-up last year, and certainly with Christian and Toby and so many of these guys, you've had guys so close in this Heisman conversation. Is there anything you take from those past experiences, whether it comes to marketing Bryce or helping get his name out there for this more, or is it just as simple as playing football for you guys?
Well, it's a combination. I think we've done as much as anybody has along college football in the last few years. We've made websites, we've communicated with a lot of voters, et cetera. But the one thing we won't do is bastardize our process. We're going out on Saturdays or Fridays or Thursday nights to go win football games. So we're going to put our best players in position to be successful. If we win awards, great, that's fine. If we don't, great, that's fine, as long as we're successful as a team and win football games.
Are you guys getting a raw deal on that, do you think? Is there some side? There's always a talk of an East Coast.
It's like a layup question.
I mean, because there's always a talk of an East Coast bias. We don't feel it because we're here in studio from noon on Saturday until 2 o'clock in the morning. We're covering everything, including you guys on the West Coast. But I think some people feel like there is. And when you look at Gerhart and McCaffrey and Love and Luck, you guys have had Heisman caliber guys and no one's taken home the hardware.
So the two things I'll say about that. Number one is it's hard to say that there's a bias. I think there are a lot of great people that have votes, but at the same time, they're still votes. They're still individual votes. They're still individual voters, and you never know what people are gonna vote for. And a lot of people vote for the high candidate in their region.
Yeah.
That's just what happens with those votes. But number two for me is we can't be focused on individual awards. I think the moment that we do that, we lose our team aspect. And that's one of the strongest things about our team is we are a tight team. We're a great team. The guys like each other. They push each other. They push for each other. And that's what's going to help us be successful. And if we happen to win awards along the way, which we've won, which is the Doak Walker, multiple All-American awards. We've won a lot of those awards. Christian McCaffrey was the most versatile player in college football, was AP Player of the Year. So we've won a lot of awards. These individuals have, which is great. But those only come with team success.
That team success gets noticed. It makes individual awards more likely. Somebody once said that it's not an East Coast bias, it's an East Coast bedtime. Because a 7 o'clock kickoff on the West Coast is a 10 o'clock kickoff at night on the East Coast. And so not a lot of people, not as many people get to see what a Bryce Love can do. What does Bryce Love do best? What will the people who stay up late at night to watch those night games on the East Coast see from that player?
So there are a lot of great football players in college football. A lot of guys coming back and some new guys are going to jump on the scene. What this young man has is pure, unadulterated speed. His three-step acceleration is the best I've seen since Rocket Ismail. Those of you that have memory back to then. This guy can explode, but the thing that's extra special about him is at less than 200 pounds, which thankfully right now he's right around 200 pounds. He's gained some weight in the offseason, gotten stronger. This guy breaks more tackles than anybody I've ever been around. He led the nation in yards after contact at less than 200 pounds. So you can combine a guy that can break tackles with a guy with that kind of speed. You've got a special football player.
I do want to show some video. Can we show the video of his quarterback? KJ Costello, coming back from a hip injury, right? So you're concerned about him and his rehab, and will he be ready for this year? We've got some video of him rehabbing with Caden Smith, one of his tight ends. Here he is. Now, I don't know who's getting more from this exercise. Smith catching the ball, or Costello with his short game. Good hip rotation there, though, Coach, so that at least has to make you smile.
This is one of those things where you do what you love and you find a way to make it work for your workout. KJ loves golf, so I think these guys made that one up so that KJ can get his swings in at the same time that Caden's getting his catch
during practice hours.
Creative solutions. You gotta find a way, build a little camaraderie along the way too. There's a million ways you can try and assign to it, and that stuff's great to see, Coach, and certainly camaraderie never seems to be an issue with the Stanford unit. I remember you guys coming into South Bend on more than one occasion, and it is that battalion you've always got to deal with. And you guys are one of the representatives for the conference, and the Pac-12 in the last couple of years has really seemed like a conference that's kind of been on the outside looking in at times from this college football playoff conversation. How aware are you guys as a program of the conference identity and what that means to you?
Well, one of the things I think a lot of us are talking about now is to really recognize how difficult our conference is, how hard it is to win our conference. And it's one of the few conferences where every single year it seems like there are 5, 6 different teams that could win the conference. Sometimes it's 7. So for us, really, it's about the strength of schedule, yes, but also how the schedule lays out, which I've talked to a lot of people about. I talked to Heather Dennis about this earlier today. You know, when we play 9 conference games, and for a couple of us, Notre Dame, you tack on Notre Dame, there are a lot of conferences that'll play 3 conference games and have a bye, 3 conference games and maybe 1 AA opponent. A lot of us are playing 6, 7, 8 conference games in a row, and that attrition is brutal. So sometimes you're on your 7th conference game in a row, and it may be a late season, short week at the Palouse or someplace like that where it's difficult to win.
Yeah.
And if you lose a game late, it's worse than losing a game early. So that's what happens. It's happened multiple times in our conference. Your
schedule is tough early. We're going to talk a little bit about some of that later on throughout the course of the summer as we get prepared for the year. You open up with San Diego State. You got Notre Dame early as well. Oregon in the mix early. USC. So it's going to be a tough first 6 weeks for you. All right, when we come back, we talked about Bryce Love. We talked about KJ Costello, his current players. How about one of his former players? Did you see Andrew Luck throwing BBs on Sunday night for the Colts? We're going to talk about how Coach talks with him in the offseason, getting ready when we come back.
College Football Live is brought to you by Mobile One Annual Protection. Proven protection for 20,000 miles.
Back with Stanford head coach David Shaw, and coach, by all accounts, your former quarterback, Andrew Luck, now with the Colts, looked great on Sunday night. They're, practicing, and he's working on a surgically repaired shoulder. How much did you get to interact with him during the offseason leading up to this year?
Well, Andrew comes back to Stanford every offseason. It's always great to see him. This year, he stayed longer. He was doing rehab. I think he wanted to kind of get away and really work on his mechanics and work with his personal trainer and really go from the ground up. So not that he had to change much, but I think he had to make some subtle adjustments because of the abuse he's taken the last couple of years. And he didn't play last year, but 2 years ago, he let it be known that he was playing hurt. He was playing banged up. He's playing through a lot of things. And now, for the first time in a couple of years, and you can see it, he looks good. He's healthy. This guy's 235, 237 pounds with no body fat. He's back to looking like the imposing
So you think
figure.
We'll see a better Luck than we saw even 2 years ago? This is sort of like we're going to see the real deal this year because he's finally 100%.
I think that's the plan. That's the trajectory that he's on right now. He feels great. And once again, we see him every offseason. This is the first time in 2.5 years where he walked in and looked like himself. I think he's chomping at the bit to get going. He's smart enough right now. He's been through a lot to say, hey, we're going to go through the process. I may take a day off here or there because I'm coming back. Whereas the old Andrew Luck would have just pushed through everything.
Yep.
Now he's being really smart. He's being very meticulous. And he knows, he's at that point in his career. He didn't have to prove anything to anybody in the preseason. It's about the regular season and taking that team to the postseason.
Talking about Andrew Luck, the biggest man on campus in recent years there have been a lot of big men on campus on that football team. But it's interesting when the big man on campus at Stanford, Andrew Luck especially now, Bryce Love currently, walks onto that campus, is he really a big man on that campus?
It's a phenomenal campus. So when Bryce Love walks across campus, you say, oh, wow, there's Bryce Love. And you turn your head, oh, my God, there's Kate Ledecky. Oh, she's great. Oh, wait, there's Condoleezza Rice. And that's just what happens on campus. And the best thing about it is if you operated that way, you'd be switching your head every single day backwards and forwards instead of saying, you know what, this is just one of those places that people that are successful, people that are excellent, this is where they congregate.
And I think part of that success is the successful habits you talk about building day to day. And I think that's a lot harder nowadays, especially with social media. And we've seen across sports a lot of the dangers of social media popping up. And I'm interested now as a coach, how often do you have to address that with your team? Is there a policy you guys have in place when it pertains to something that's a part of all these kids' lives now?
So the one thing that I won't do is restrict our guys' speech. I won't do that. They get to be themselves. What I talk to them about is making sure that what you're putting out there is actually who you are. Because it's not going to go anywhere. Somebody's always going to be able to find it. And you want that to truly represent who you are and what you believe and where you come from and who you're with. So for that, we try to get them to be very, very conscious of what they're putting out there in the world. And there's actually in the Stanford, in the quad, in the Stanford church, there's a bunch of different sayings around there. And one of them is an old saying that talks about whatever you put out into the world, somebody else breathes in. Yeah. So I try to talk to the guys about that, about whatever you're putting out, somebody else is going to read, and how is that going to affect them? Are you adding something positive out there into the world or negative? So really think about what you're putting out there, because you want to put a positive spin on things. You want to put positive things out there in the world so people can receive it in.
In a sense, it would be hypocritical because you've got to use social media in recruiting nowadays too, right? So you wouldn't want to tell your players not to use it at all, but we're going to turn around here in an hour and we're going to be using it ourselves.
But it's such a great vehicle that can do so many great things, so many different ways to connect with people from all over the world, and to really talk about how great your life is, how great Stanford is, how great your situation is, what you're looking to do beyond school, the funny things that happen in your life. As long as you keep it light and fun and exciting, it can be a positive thing in your life.
You know, just today, the NBA signed a deal with MGM in terms of sports gambling. It's happening. It's going from state to state being legalized. How do you think college football is going to be affected by it? Because, let's be honest, people have been gambling illegally on college football for decades, and now it's just going to be legal to do it.
Well, I think the biggest thing for all of us is we have to make sure that we protect our student athletes from those elements out there that could negatively influence them or negatively influence the game. That's the biggest and most important thing, that the sanctity of college football, which we all love college football, that it still gets to be pure as possible and not influenced by anybody outside. And that, as long as those two things, we start there first and foremost, whatever we build beyond there, from conference to conference, state to state, and through the NCAA, that ends up being whatever it is, as long as we keep the game as pure as it can be.
Would you be okay giving full injury reports like they do in the NFL? Because I know you college coaches like to say, it's a lower body injury. When will he be back? We're not really sure. We'll take it day by day. We'll evaluate him tomorrow. You guys like to be really sheepish about that kind of stuff.
So for me, that's kind of a fine line, because you'd love to have some uniformity, but at the same time, we have these HIPAA rules, and most of these guys are under 21 years old, and to talk about someone's health out there in the public, forget about the football game. This is a young man's health. If he wants to talk to people about how he's feeling, that's up to him and his family, but I don't think it's right for me to make that decision. So there are a lot of us in college football that's still pulling back on that, not because it's an advantage or not advantage. Once the game starts, we're all playing football anyway. It's really about the privacy of that young man and his body.
Coach, I'd take the other side of that, though, because like Chris said, gambling's been happening illegally forever, and gamblers have been trying to get next to either players or people that know the players to find out information. They might pay a girl to walk up to him in a bar to ask him how the quarterback's knee's feeling in order to get that information for the gambling. And the player would never know that this was anything other than a pretty girl, because it's all underground rather than out in the sunshine. And it seems like it would be a small price to pay to be able to have just the orthopedic injuries. The knee is not good, he's questionable or probable, whatever the NFL uses. To me, that's a small price to pay and not an invasion of privacy, in order to make it less likely that gamblers would use the subterranean route to try to worm their way into a program.
And that is the other argument. First of all, my guys better not be in the bars. Second of all, I understand that argument, and at the same time, the way that I do it, I like the way that I do it. I don't lie to my guys. I don't lie to our media. I let them know, hey, I think he's going to play, or hey, I don't think he's going to play. Hey, this is a late week decision. That's kind of program to program. That's why I think it would be great to have some uniformity without getting to over into specifics. But if I know a guy's out, I'll always tell him that he's out.
Coach, a lot of rule changes probably coming in that avenue, a lot of rule changes coming on the field for you guys too. And I know specifically one place where you guys always felt like you've had an advantage is on the kickoff, and now we see some rule changes with that. Where are you with some of those changes, and how are you planning on adjusting?
Well, that's what's going to be really fascinating about this year. Which teams use that rule, which teams don't, which teams game plan for it by how they kick off, which teams don't. For us, gosh, I love the kickoff. It's an exciting way to start a game.
Really loved it when you had Christian McCaffrey.
You know,
back there,
but even look at our history. Goes back to Chris Owusu, who was the best kickoff returner in the nation when he was there. Ty Montgomery won the awards for the top kickoff returner. Christian McCaffrey won the award for the top kickoff returner. Year after year, we've been really, really good at kickoff return, and I love that part of the game so much. I'd hate to lose it. I understand the desire to adjust it, to make sure it's as safe as possible. So that's what I'm interested in. I don't anticipate us doing anything differently, but I'm curious to see what other teams do.
And that new rule, for those who don't know, inside the 25-yard line, if you call a fair catch it inside the 25, say at the 12-yard line, it's just as good as a touchback. Ball goes to the 25-yard line. That's where you begin scrimmaging. Coach, thanks for joining us today. Great visiting with you. Best of luck this year.
Appreciate it. Good to see you guys.
Coach David Shaw in Stanford. Don't forget, we got a lot coming up here over the next couple of days on ESPN. including this Saturday, the Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement ceremony on ESPN. The class of 2018 includes Randy Moss, Ray Lewis, and Brian Urlacher, among others. That's Saturday, 7 o'clock Eastern. Also on the ESPN app, so you can watch.
College Football Live is brought to you by Oscar Mayer, on a mission to get our better hot dogs in your hand. Try one today.
Let's take a look at Michigan's newest quarterback as we gear up for football, presented by Dish. Shea Patterson was an early Heisman candidate at Ole Miss before an October knee injury ended his season earlier than expected. He's got a new home in Ann Arbor, where the Wolverines got just 9 passing touchdowns from their quarterbacks last year, their fewest in 42 seasons. Back when Bo Schembechler was the coach, he didn't like passing the football. All right, in a Bleacher Report interview, former Michigan and current UCLA quarterback Wilton Speight recalled a conversation with his former coach in which Jim Harbaugh told him to avoid eating poultry, since chickens are, quote, nervous birds. What do you make of that? Nervous birds that don't eat chicken?
I think they should eat more chicken. Ancient cultures used to eat the heart of their respected enemies to assume their powers. Well, who beat Michigan in the Outback Bowl?
Oh, South Carolina. The Gamecocks.
And the Gamecock
chickens.
They should be eating more chicken, not less.
What do you think about this?
I got to tell you guys, there's really nothing to be afraid of. It is a real delight. I have been eating chicken for years. You can deep fry it like this. It usually helps you a fair amount. Coach, you don't need to be worried about chicken. You need to be worried about leprechauns. You need to be worried about shamrocks. Week 1 is just around the corner.
You know, I think I'm on Harbaugh's side now. I changed my mind.
This is our version of the chicken dance right here. Sounds more like you should be talking about Polska.
No,